Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is Zurban Auto, and today we are going to be changing a muffler. 12mm socket and a ratchet wrench, really all you need for this one. And you should get a new muffler and a seal for where your muffler connects to the flange there. So safely jack up the vehicle. There's a nice jack point on this Honda Civic, and we are going to put this under this frame rail here, under this control arm, and we will be ready to get underneath there safely. We're going to leave the hydraulic jack in place so we have double safety. Now let's get started. So these aren't too bad to remove, these rubber things. If you give them a bit of lube, makes a world of difference for getting them to just wiggle off. You can take a pry bar and kind of pry them back, or depending on which way it's facing, just actually push it off with the pry bar as well, and it just pops right out like that. And the same thing on the other side. Since it's snapped off, those two are out, the whole thing will fall right out. If your exhaust was still connected, you would want to unbolt the two bolts on the back flange, of course, first. Then it would be able to be easily removed. Also a good idea just to spray the bolts with some WD-40 or some kind of a liquid wrench. Just makes them easier to come out if you get it on the threads, because exhaust bolts, they're heated and cooled constantly, so they seem to get in there, get stuck pretty good sometimes. Then just using a 12mm socket, you can break them loose. Just as you start to apply force, see if they want to turn. If they don't want to turn, you want to be careful that you don't break them, but if you did, you could always just get new bolts anyway. And I should say that it is recommended that you actually replace these bolts, but for something like this, it's not that big of a deal. You could reuse the old ones. If you have air or power tools, makes it go a lot faster. You can just find the best position above or below the frame, zip the bolts out, makes it quick, but you can also do it by hand. So nothing wrong with that at all. The piece I'm touching there is actually a metal gasket seal type thing, so you're going to need to remove the old one in order to put a new one on. So I didn't have much luck with a pry bar trying to pry it off, but I found the air hammer worked awesome. Took about 1 second with an air hammer to just pop it, just split it into pieces, as you see here. If you don't have an air hammer, don't worry about it. Just use a flat blade screwdriver or a pry bar and just hit it with a hammer from behind like I was with the air hammer, and that will be just fine. If you're patient, you'll eventually be able to pop it off. It's a good idea to clean the rust off the bolts. If you don't have a bench grinder like this, don't worry. You can just use some like scuff pad, like that wool pad, or just spray them with some lube when you thread them in, and they should still go back in fine. So here's the new seal, nice and shiny. It's a bevel fit, so you can just see how it sits inside the muffler. like that. So you want to put the flat side on the other side. So here I'm just cleaning the surface that the seal sits on, just using a drill and a wire brush wheel. You can also do it by hand with a scuff pad or a wire brush by hand. And here, just by hand, press the new seal on, just as far back as you can get it. You'll be fine as long as you can get the bolts threaded. If you get the bolts threaded, it will push the seal back the rest of the way and just tighten it all up. If you can't get the bolts threaded, then you might want to try gently tapping the seal in, but it is quite soft and can kind of get a little bit mangled up if you start beating on it. So just want to watch that.
In Saturday, April the 16th, we will be in Orlando. Yes, Orlando, Florida. I bet you could find something to do on it. Maybe in addition to us, you might take a road trip. It can happen. And May the 7th, a few weeks later, we'll be in Los Angeles. Our second smart conference there at the Shrine Auditorium. Saturday, May the 7th. As of right this second, tickets are on sale in these cities.
Step 6 is to hang the exhaust or hang the muffler back on the rubber brackets. Just makes it easier to do it this way. Hang it on there, and then you can go and line the flange up and put the bolts in on that side. So next step is just to thread the bolts in by hand. If you've pressed the seal in far enough, you should be able to get some threads with the bolts. They do have those kind of funny springs in front of them. Just helps probably with vibrations and stuff. But once you thread them in by hand, then you can go to the wrench and you can work from one side to the other, just tightening them a little bit back and forth gradually.
When did that happen?
This just shows that gloves can be a good idea when working with different metal and things like that, so you don't cut yourself. If you have a torque wrench, torque the bolts to 16 foot-pounds. This is an electronic torque wrench, but you can also get a pretty cheap one, a click type wrench, which does the exact same thing as this one. You can get them on Amazon. I'll send a link. I'll put a link below the video for that. If you don't have one, just snug them up by hand. Just don't need to go crazy tight, and you'll be fine.
Here we go.
And so you email and just tell us what it is, and put your phone number and email so Kelly then will call back out. Put your phone to her home screen, and she'll get you set up for a certain time that day. We don't tell you what to say, but we just want to organize the schedule. You can follow me on Twitter, by the way, @DaveRandall.
Purrs like a kitten. So lastly, just check with your hand around the exhaust flange. You'll feel if there's any puffs of smoke coming out, just to make sure there's no leaks. And congratulations, your car is nice and quiet again.